Appreciate you guys being here to be supportive. For those of you who don't know me, as Devin pointed out, I interview people for a living, right? So I run an executive search practice where we hire leaders and innovators and technical specialists, subject matter experts who are transforming the businesses that they're employed by. So obviously I do a lot of interviewing. I decided one day to turn the camera on and put those interviews on the internet, right? So I became the host of Being Built podcast, which I've been hosting throughout since late last year. That's been a great experience. So as the host of Being Built, I get to interview innovators and tech leaders, and today's no exception. Glad to be here with Jason Molnar, the founder, one of several founders of Infinity Labs. So I'll try to bleed as many good, insightful ideas out of him as possible so that he can do a great presentation on being an entrepreneur and running a thriving business without having to prepare any slides.
That's right. No slides.
That's right. Win. So, Jason, you're a combat veteran, father, husband, family man. You sit on a couple of boards. You're what I would describe as a doer, a busy person doing a lot of high-impact things. So it's kind of fun to interview you here today. Back to Infinity Labs, can you kind of take us back to when all of that started and how you guys began?
Yeah, pleasure to be here, by the way. You said combat veteran and father. Sometimes with those kids, combat is a part of the process. So those things mesh. I got 3 young ones under 8 years old. So Infinity Labs, we're 3 years old now, and it's hard to believe. That process of starting a business, I can't believe it's 3 years in my past, just because you look up and the time has already flown by. But that decision to start Infinity Labs was one that came about pretty abruptly. The founders of Infinity Labs, there were 7 of us, and one unfortunately passed away during COVID, and I think it was beginning of 22. 6 of us remain. That decision was really based on a corporate restructuring. We were all at one place together. That company decided to go left, and we said, well, I think we can do it and go right. Nothing right, wrong, or indifferent about that, just made a different decision. Now, that decision happened to be timed in the middle of what you may remember as a global pandemic when COVID kicked off. And so July of 2020, when the world is trying to figure out how to work, when to work, what to work, 7 of us jackwagons decided we were going to leave consistent employment with benefits and start our own business. And that takes a giant leap of faith. You really either have to have some intestinal fortitude, or you have to be crazy, or a little bit of both. And I think we did both of those very well. And starting with 7 founders, one of the things our CEO Ken Edge has talked about is it gave us the ability to scale. From day one, we divided and conquered. I told Aaron before this that in that first 3 days in business, or first 4 days in business, I made almost 2,000 calls, right, to people within industry and government channels. It was a shotgun blast of this business has started. And half of the appeal for folks were, who the heck would leave a thriving company to start on their own in the middle of a pandemic? I got to hear these guys talk. Like, why would you do that? And then it became clear to folks in these conversations, not only did we know what we were doing, and we had a plan, but that we could provide a relief valve for them, right? Government folks were used to doing work in buildings, in environments that required no windows and very thick walls. And when the pandemic kicked off, they realized, well, crap, we can't do that. We have to get people out of these places. We have to let them work from home or different environments. How are we going to do that? And here was Infinity Labs, day one, poised to do that. We were only remote, and so we became a relief valve for their infrastructure, and that really catapulted our growth. Within 4 months of hiring, we had won a near $1 billion contract. And so that was a key thing for the government, was our flexibility very early on.
How long did it take you to go from zero to your first dollar?
We had our first dollars within 6 months. It's a lot of prep work. It is non-trivial for someone working in the defense space to get paperwork together, to get all those different things, those requirements, the certifications. You almost have to have a high-level master's degree or PhD in what you need to do to get that together. And I see some head nods. It's crazy the hoops you have to jump through. But luckily, with, again, 7 of us, we divided and conquered, and someone would handle this tranche of things and the other would handle this. And so that's what really made us gel early and often, enabled us to make revenue, within that first 6-7 months.
You guys had all worked together before.
That's
so
right. Yeah.
Were your lanes, did you have a default for how you would divide and conquer?
For about 4 or 5 of us, we did, for sure. A couple other folks, we slotted into roles best suited to their talents. But if you can't tell, I like to talk, and so I was easily the business development guy from day one. Mm-hmm. And I just took that Rolodex of relationships, and that's where I fit in.
Did the whole Jerry Maguire scene?
Pretty much, right? Pretty much, right?
Cool. Did those early calls that you made in those first days, is that where those dollars came from?
No,
Okay.
That's not where those dollars came from. The dollars came from the smart people in the business who could do high-fidelity physics modeling. That is not me. I do not have a master engineering degree. Do not have a degree in physics. A couple of the other founding members, specifically Nick Marquardt and Kurt Clendenning, who are super geniuses. Government people wanted their brains on projects. But what I helped do is I helped marry those opportunities. I would talk to one government person, they would talk to another. We would come back to the middle and meet. He has this problem, she has this problem. You guys can do this. Mm-hmm. And so I would feed those to them because they didn't need a business guy. They needed a technical person to execute their project. Mm-hmm. And so because we nobody needed the credit, we would just throw these leads over the wall to each other. Mm-hmm. And then, the folks with the engineering degrees would bring in the solution. And then that started to net dollars.
Was there ever a point in those first, 6 to 12 months where you guys questioned whether or not you would make it?
Is there a point? Is there not a point in that first 6 to 12 months where I worked in a damn laundry room with laundry running in the background, with my house being renovated? It wasn't even my house, and I got this washing machine shaking in the background as I'm working. There was always a point. You were always asking yourself, was this the right thing to do? Why did I do this? I remember when I didn't have to work this hard. Why did I choose this? But being now forward of that journey, that hill was worth the climb, and it continues to be worth the climb. But I don't think you're really challenging yourself or pushing yourself to the limit if you are not constantly either questioning, hey, am I doing this the wrong way? Was this the wrong decision? I'm going to take a bourbon break. I took a few bourbon breaks during that time, and then kind of regroup, because you have to go in these 18 to 20 hour periods. People who think creating a business you can work 6 to 8 hours a day, sorry, no, you can't. And if you figure that out, then you're smarter than me, and tip of the hat to you.
That's not this class. That's not this podcast.
Yeah, that's not this one. This was a lot of grinding. Even amongst us, to be able to scale so quickly, it was a lot of hard work. Initially, for sure.
So when we first met, we talked a little bit about the entrepreneurial mindset, and tell us a little bit about that. You described a couple of things that you thought were important for success as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, Dr. Angela Duckworth describes grit as one of the key factors to determining if one is going to make it in a business, in the world, etc. Grit is the right word. You have to hear no an awful lot. You have to jump over obstacles. You have to trip over your own feet. You have to arrive to a customer meeting and realize you've been beaten by a bigger vendor. You're just going to get your face kicked in a lot. And the world has not really prepared, folks these days for those sort of challenges. That's starting a business 101. If that's not your journey, that's okay. It doesn't have to be your journey. But if you want it to be, just know it comes with a very heavy backpack full of obstacles. And so you have to have grit. You have to be able to, get knocked down and get up again. And even if it takes you a while to get up, I will say it's okay to take a while to get up. Like, man, that one stunk. If you're running capture on a business opportunity and you're trying to convert it from a lead to an actual sale, and then you're at the finish line and they go, oh, well, we chose another vendor who's, less expensive. And you just have to walk away with a smile on your face, right? So grit for certain. You also have to build your armor. And, I come from, let's just say, a family of background challenges, right? Single mother, father left when I was very little. And I could do two things growing up, right? I could be a shell of myself and be mad that he wasn't around, or I could use it as a chip on my shoulder to kind of persevere. And that helped me build my armor. And then going into the Army and becoming a combat arms officer and being in combat, I wore literal armor, but I already had that kind of emotional armor I needed to get through those tough times. So I was set up for success by some multivariate circumstances. And so people who have those backgrounds in this room don't see it as a burden, see it as an opportunity. Because if you go into it and you think, well, I had a tough childhood, and yeah, I ate cereal for every meal for like 2 years. That's all my mom could afford. So I get it, right? Like, we have challenging backgrounds, but don't use that as an excuse to not achieve. You can achieve. You just got to build up your armor.
Yeah, they say that the only difference between a hero's origin story and a villain's origin story is the attitude they have in response to adversity.
Sure.
Right? So kudos to you for responding the right way. Do you feel like you talked about building up your armor and being in business development, marketing, you obviously get you have to face rejection.
Mm-hmm.
Make thousands of calls. Obviously, you have people that don't want to talk to you, that don't
Mm-hmm.
answer, that don't call back. How did you and the organization deal with kind of the bad news or the rejection that you get?
Yeah, it can be tough. But one thing we like to do is we build up, the way we describe it, as a sales funnel, right? If you put all your leads at the top of the funnel and they come down to a point, and some of them are going to filter out. You just constantly have to replenish that sales funnel, right? Not all of them are going to come through to the bottom. In fact, very few of them will. If you have a conversion rate above 20% in our field, you are kicking ass. And we've been higher on opportunities, 30, 40%. We're doing really well, but that requires a significant amount of investment of time, understanding the customer, which we refer to as customer intimacy, and frankly, being someone that people want to work with. One of the things that you and I talked about is people get to choose who they want to work with. Mm-hmm. If you are Mr. or Miss Loud person in the room and that does not match your customer, you got a problem. But if your customer's loud and you're loud, you might work really well together. You have to be able to understand that customer innately. And I don't have a big enough ego that if I meet a customer and they are extremely educated with multivariate physics degrees, 3 or 4 engineering degrees, I am not going to be the brain in the room. I'm going to bring in the smart people, and then I'm going to insert jokes where I can, because I can feel out the room. I know when a joke is appropriate. I know how to toe the line, and then we tend to close and convert deals based upon just bringing the right people in the room. So I will tell you, another tip is bring the right person in the room. If you are not the right person, but you have the relationship or you've started that connection, that's fine. But don't be afraid to bring along some backup. Most deals are not closed in a 1v1 situation, a 1 versus 1. It's almost always, if you can 2v1 the situation, if you can get multiple people in there to give the customer what they want, to show different approaches, then they're going to like your solution. The trick is, though, Aaron, as you mentioned, you may do all that and still not get the sale. But I don't look at it as a loss. I look at it as a seed sown. Mm-hmm. In this business, I could plant seeds and have 3 years ago that are finally I'm starting to harvest now. Simply because I gave something, a value to a customer. I didn't get their work, but I gave them a value, including a point of contact or another company. Hey, this company is better for you. They're going to meet your rates. They're going to understand your needs a little better. But we'll be available when you have some of that higher fidelity work. And I've done a lot of that. And I'll be damned if they don't come back every time.
So when you come into be a guest on the podcast in a few weeks, we'll delve into your business, what you guys sell, and what you're building a little bit more. But for now, maybe just for the sake of kind of understanding your entrepreneurial journey, can you help the room understand what you guys offer and your sales process and who your customer is?
Yeah, sure. So our core customer is the Department of Defense right now. We do have some commercial customers, and the services that we provide or solutions are engineering based. So high fidelity physics modeling, cybersecurity, really based on vulnerability assessments. That should scare the pants off of you, because we've got people smart enough to go into infrastructure and systems and say, we've hacked in, we know how to hack in, we're in your system. I don't have to shut down your system if I can shut down a chiller that stops your servers, right? So we've got people who do that, and we have a large effort undergoing for that right now, and that's going to cause our growth to shoot up through the moon. Advanced research and development. I was talking to my friend Trevor in the back of the room here. I think we're at 16, 17 SBIRs right now, Small Business Innovation Research Grants, or STTR, Small Business Technology Grants, which are partnerships with either other industry partners or academic partners, where government customers put together basically problems and you work with these other organizations to solve them. And we've done a really good job converting those from what are called phase one seedling efforts, which is really just, it's paid marketing, business development of your plan, to moving those into phase two, which is real research, capped at about 1.5 to 1.7 million, and then all the way up to phase threes, which could have ceilings, up to $1 billion depending on the customer. And then we provide training solutions for some of those high fidelity modeling and simulation services.
So you mentioned earlier running capture. Your sales cycle is complex.
Yeah.
In the defense world, obviously, there's a lot to prove in the acquisition of new work.
Sure.
So there's a big investment being made into chasing a deal or doing work. You're not running a food truck, right, where you're doing transactions every second. There's a long chase involved, big transactions. You don't win a lot of them.
Right.
So getting to know your customer is huge. Tell us a little bit about what you do to understand who your customer is, make sure you're investing in the right pursuits and acquisitions, and really know what their needs are.
Yeah, it wasn't always lollipops and rainbows for Infinity Labs. Initially, when we came out of the gate, we chased opportunities we shouldn't have chased. We put money into things that we had no business putting money into, but we thought were good ideas. Now, with some perspective and some experience, we saw that maybe that wasn't a money flush because we learned from that, but it wasn't in the pursuit of our core business. And so the sales cycle, at least in the government contracting space, there are large companies that have 3 letters that start a capture process 4 years out for an opportunity. Think about that. Think of the time and effort that goes into 4 years of planning to get to a day where a solicitation drops, and then you are ready to produce your 120 pages of data and put it in your solicitation. That's crazy, right? That part of the business is extremely complex. We're not at the 4 years, right? But we are at a point where we're looking, 6, 12, 18, 24 months out and talking to customers about needs 2 to 3 years from now. Because you talk about needs 2 to 3 years from now, because guess what? They've already got an idea of what their budgets are going to be, and they can start to tell you, hey, I'm going to have this amount of money for this problem set in 18 months to 24 months. That's when you start crafting solutions. If you are looking at an acquisition website, sam.gov is the one that comes to mind. If you were looking at that site and you're like, yep, here's an opportunity, I'm going to win it, you've already lost. If the first time you're seeing is on a website, you are well beyond, you're not left of launch. It's already launched. It's already in the stratosphere. So you've missed it. So in our industry, you really have to push those timelines left and understand your customers' needs, their gaps, and their budgets in order to be effective.
Well, and the opposite is also true, right? Your customer needs to understand your capabilities in advance, or have some perspective on what your expertise is, perhaps before they even write their RFP. Am I wrong?
Oh, you're absolutely right. No one from the federal government is just going to call you up and hand you money. That's not a thing that happens. Now, as you get larger, they may have money they need to park on a contract vehicle, and that may benefit you, which is great. But you got to go out and earn it. I will tell you that the federal government, it is a grind. It is a hustle like any other hustle, where you're out and you're trying to show them what I call a capabilities deck or capabilities brief. You say, these are our company capabilities. Is there an area we could work together? How can we marry this for an opportunity down the road? And sometimes they look at you and just go, yep, I don't have anything for you, but I'll keep you in mind. I looked today through our database for non-disclosure agreements, and in 3 years, we have over 500 non-disclosure agreements.
Wow.
Every conversation of substance, you put a non-disclosure agreement in place, right? So that means I've had 500 conversations and maybe converted about 50 of those. Maybe, right? That that's crazy to think that that's part of the game, but it is. And so you really have to be diligent about filling that sales funnel up, and then understanding your customer, their very basic needs, and knowing you're not just going to get money. It may just be a seed you plant for later.
So in today's economy, obviously you have to be prepared to pivot fast as the needs of customers or a project or the market in general evolve, capabilities evolve, your organization grows, matures, figures out that you figured out a few things and you need to offer different things in a different way. How do you balance that against a long acquisition sales cycle and the need to create a persisting, recognizable brand in your customer's mind?
Yeah, so it's a battle of base hits in our game. So there are all sorts of funding opportunities, right? Some of these small grants can be a 3 to 6 month window. Sometimes customers do, based upon your reputation, say, hey, if do you have the bandwidth to support 6 to 8 months work? The answer is always yes. It should always be yes. And then you're also simultaneously, those short-term leads, you're also growing midterm leads. Maybe it's a phase 2 SIBR that's 18 months to 24 months. And then you're also looking at large IDIQs, indefinite quality, indefinite delivery, that you can put bids on and submit proposals for. So you've got battle of base hits. First base is a 3-month contract. Second base is a 6 to 12 month. Third base is 12 to 18. And anything beyond that, you're starting to get longer capture.
Well, maybe the difference in your game is that base hits are worth points.
Bases, yeah, they're worth dollars. Yeah. But you got to add the volume of those dollars to make them matter.
Right. You're really going for that home run, though.
Yeah.
That's really where you win.
Yeah.
Right. What's the state of the business now?
Business is flourishing. We're at 68 people today. We turned 3 in July. We'll probably end the year somewhere between, I'll just say conservatively, 75 and 80. Maybe even more if some of the cyber opportunities ratchet up. We're looking for consistent growth next year, both in revenue and personnel. We're in the final stages of preparing an expansion in the second floor of the Coons building, which is adjacent to this. So unlike you folks who had to commute here, I just walked over from our building, talked to a couple of people and came in here. So getting ready to take over the whole second floor there. And then, we're also starting to look at what expansion would be like to take on other floors. That's no promise yet, but the need for space, the need for people, the need for secure facilities is growing.
So you're how many people now?
68.
68. You guys have figured out how to lead leaders, hire people who manage people, detach a little bit from the delivery of services.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the difficulties you face there.
Yeah, so I'll speak to just generally. Most of my contemporaries have more, they have more direct reports. I've got kind of my hand in all the jars, and I'm spinning plates constantly, whereas they're running the core business and frankly deserve the resources. I do a lot of the stuff that ends up on the peripheries. It's hard to give the control because once you've proven you know how to do it, even if you make a mistake or mistakes, give that span of control to someone is difficult. But as a military officer, that's like day one for you, like learn how to give up control. So our CEO is a retired Air Force officer. I'm Army. And so the philosophy we've kind of done is, we'll grow people into the right roles. We try to promote internally. If we need someone with a significant skill set, we will wait and we will find the right person externally. That is not easy. In today's work climate, really waiting on the right person can be difficult. But it's a matter of span of control. What are you willing to give up? What are their left and right limits? Where are you going to let them operate? Where are you going to stop them and go, hey, well, let's talk about what you're about to do here. And you have to be okay with mistakes. In fact, frankly, if you're not making mistakes, even as a young leader, you're probably not growing because mistakes are going to happen. The trick is don't make the mistake twice. And so what we have to do is we try to identify many of those pitfalls, obstacles early on for our leadership team, but inevitably we miss some. And then if that happens, we walk them through what went wrong, how can we fix it, and we move out and we trust but verify. If you're constantly putting your hand down there and micromanaging, you're not going to be a place people want to work, and your leaders are just going to, they're not going to support your mission and vision, and therefore the people won't support it.
talked a little bit about hiring. Obviously, you guys have had to figure out how to do that well to hire dozens of people in a short period of time. Are those some of the mistakes you've made? Have you made some bad hires?
Sure. We've taken a chance or two, kind of out of our core, person that we like to hire, right? Well-rounded, doesn't have to be extremely technical. It's really more of a culture fit. Mm-hmm. You could have a minimal technical background, right, and be a good culture fit. And if we have the resources and projects for you, we'll probably take a risk on you, mm-hmm. because we'd rather teach someone the technical skills than teach them how to fit into a culture. We have found that if you don't get the right culture fit early on, that person, can be kind of a fox in the henhouse, right? They can really disrupt things, and it can make an environment where people kind of look around like, who is this person? Who is this? What are they doing? And so we take a lot of time finding the right fit and trying to match up those skills. And you don't always get every skill you're looking for. For any recruiters in the room, I know you may know one. You don't always get the right, the exact fit, every box on the resume. But you have to be willing to accept, hey, I can train these things, but I can't train these things.
What culture criteria is important to Infinity Labs?
We really like, one, it starts with a positive attitude, right? Because the way our industry works, you could be working on a project one day and then 15 days later you could have done well and we've got to put you 25% on a new project. Or we've got to put you 50% on a new discipline that, yes, you have an engineering background, yes, you can write C++, but you haven't done it in 3 years. Sorry, you're on it. Mm-hmm. You have to be adaptable. You have to be willing to be flexible. And we have found that people that are adaptable and flexible can operate in those gray areas, right? They can innovate in the in these small interfaces in between known and unknown. Mm-hmm. And those folks do really, really well, and they end up moving up fast through our organization. Adaptability in our industry is key. If you are kind of stagnant, or if those skills are perishable and you're not doing anything to build them up, you're going to get passed up by your peers, or you're going to get outperformed by them.
We talked over breakfast about hiring as a business strategy and making some high impact critical hires that are a little bit risky but critical to the success of the business. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, again, not always a base hit or a home run. You as a business owner, you do your best to describe what you believe the job is. You put it in writing. You put it there in front of them, and inevitably, some of these strategic hires, they can hit 3 or 4 of the blocks out of 10. They can hit 5 or 6. Some of them can hit 10. We have found that our sweet spot isn't someone who's 40 years working for a major defense contractor or the government, retired as a 4-star general with constellations on their shoulders. We have found that that's not for us. We like the folks who have been managing large programs and understand how dollars are spent, the colors of money. That's just different types of money. That's the euphemism there. Can manage people, and frankly can juggle a lot of plates. Because that's what makes this business grow and scale, is you get those people that can spin the plates, mm-hmm. and they can come back to it from time to time again and touch it. And we have found that it's not the super senior, but if we get someone who's kind of that mid-manager and looking to progress level, they hit it out of the park. I mean, we've made a few of those hires that are just home runs.
I'm a big fan of kind of getting engagement and questions. I've got more I want to ask you.
Sure.
Can we pause and see if anybody wants to jump in?
Yeah,
while we've got a kind of break in the subject matter. Anybody want to ask questions? Good. I don't want to hog it all. There are any on your mind? Am I asking the right ones?
Talk about
You'll be next, Jeff.
Money, but do you have recommendations for any of those that are looking to get the tech industry that want to work with the DoD, and how to navigate through the bureaucracy of getting a government contract with DoD? Any recommendations?
Yeah, well, it very much depends on the expertise, the capability, right? If you're in a high tech environment and you've got a skill like artificial intelligence, machine learning, if you've got a background that does that, if you are someone who's really in tune with high fidelity physics, there are certain audiences that one can be pointed to, right? So it very much depends on what the capability is. Would you give me an example of what maybe the capability is?
was just a general question, because there's,
Yeah.
if you attend any of the AFRL, AFMC, LCMC.
Yeah,
those
I would
things,
I would recommend you attend as much of those as possible, just to start building up what your brand is going to be, what your capability is going to be, see how other companies market. I mean, there's some really strong marketing going on in Dayton for small companies. I got my buddy in the back, Jeff Grayley, Mile 2. They do a great job. There's a couple other companies that put out some consistent messaging, but go to those booths at these conventions, pay the floor fee to wander around, pick up their marketing material, and see how other people are selling their products. There's I was once told as a young Army officer, there is no such thing as plagiarism on an operations order, right? Now, I found out in training that there is such thing, and that guy got kicked out. If you were looking at plans, if you were looking at strategies at these conferences, there's nothing saying you can't beg, borrow, and steal from what they're doing, right? Some of the major conferences, I would focus, if you want your customer to be commercial, South by Southwest is a good one. If you want your customer in defense, Right Dialogue with the Industry, Lifecycle Industry Days. SMD in Huntsville, Alabama is like a master's course in how to market a small to large defense company. You go there and you'll learn more in those 4 days than you've learned in 5 years. It's just the business development folks, the technical folks, they're all there, and then the government people join you on the floor. So you're getting a mix of customer needs, requirements, speeches, and then you're getting how industry pitches to those customers right there. That's like a master class, and that's not expensive. It's like $200 to attend that. So I would encourage you, anyone who's looking at maybe even the defense space, to figure out your market, commercial or defense, and then go to those conferences or trade shows and just kind of saturate yourself with what's available.
Jeff, you had one?
Yeah, I got an important one, but it's simple. Is the job ever not hard?
Oh, man. Yeah, so what I have found out as a founder for this company is you get all the worst problems at the top, right? There are some major achievements, and there's some really proud moments, almost like a parent with a child seeing things grow up, right? You just kind of want to wrap your arms around it and go, I'm so proud. Oh, I can't do that, but high five. I'll high five you. It's always hard. It's always difficult. The decisions you are faced with as an entrepreneur and a founder specifically, it's always a challenge. It's like, oh, how do I climb Mount Everest? Let's figure that out. And then you're done. You've climbed it. You've summited. And then someone says, well, how do we do something else that's completely different? Now you got to climb back down and figure that out. It's always a challenge. We've navigated expanding buildings, signing different leases, growing in different locations, different tax structures, understanding tax liabilities, what different states require for employment, how to hire people with physics versus computer engineering, computer science backgrounds, what skills they bring. The list goes on and on of the things you have to figure out. And there is no book that says, hey, dummy, right? This is entrepreneurship. It varies by your industry. The simple answer to your question, Jeff, it's always hard. And I don't do a great job of pausing when it's rewarding. I don't do a great job at reflecting when it's great. We just had our best revenue month yet last month. Here's how we celebrated. We didn't do anything. We that's it.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. But that's it. And so I don't take enough time, to stop and smell the roses. There'll be moments for that, and I know I should do it a little more, but I get the most solace out of watching people smile in the office. If anyone watches our social media, we're doing fantasy football right now, and you've got like 24 people who are nut jobs about it, 12 of which have never played before, and it's fun to watch. So getting engagement like that organically, not forcing anyone to do it, those are the little victories, but man, it is always hard.
What else? Somebody else had one.
Yeah, so your leadership team is unique in the sense that you all started it together, right? What happens? How do you walk through the situations when you all don't agree?
Oh, yeah.
Especially big decisions.
Good question.
Yeah, so we have hard conversations. You can't be afraid of the hard conversations. I will tell you, those folks who are in here who are younger than me, and I turned 40 in 2 weeks. I may look older, but just 40. you got to have the hard conversations, and you can't be afraid of the conflict that's going to happen. It will happen. It will be, sometimes it will feel personal, but if the baseline is what's best for the business, then you have to be okay with other people kind of poking you in the chest and saying, you did this wrong, fix it. I've had a couple times where I've been poked in the chest and someone said, this is wrong, fix it. And I'm like, oh man, ouch, okay, I'll fix that. My military background makes it a little easier to absorb that, but I would say it comes to being able to have hard conversations, but it also comes with a modicum of respect. You can't go in there and just, Marine Corps knife's edge, whole hand leadership with someone and go, you fix this, like that. Doesn't always work like that. You have to know how to engage your business partners, and also understand where they come from, right? I don't always look at things from an operations perspective, and I've had to take that role on a little more to understand how someone on the operations side would be affected about one of my grand ideas, right? Operations may just go, no, terrible idea. So hard conversations, respect, and then we almost always do have a little bit of a morale event afterward, whether it's a drink, a dinner, Topgolf, something like that, just to kind of get whatever energy is out of that room into something else.
Good question, Nick. You had one, Keith?
Yeah, I was going to mention, you mentioned passing a colleague, and that happened was right after the first meet, guys. Obviously, the emotional impact, I'm sure, was difficult, but in terms of the operational change, like that hard conversation, what do you do without this key person? Can you accept that?
Yeah, that wasn't a fun one because you've divided and conquered for so long, and now someone has to take over those person's responsibilities, regardless of the tragic passing. Those core capabilities, those different components that they were handling, all have to be brought on and onboarded to someone else. In Keith, I got a chunk of those, a good chunk when Jason passed away. And so it became one of those, Dutch boy fingers in the dam situation for a little bit, where you're just plugging holes, and then this hole's leaking more, so I'm going to plug that one. But eventually, you get better at plugging the holes, and eventually you can build up that capability, right? And so it's not a challenge I would ever wish upon anyone, but it is one you got to be prepared for. Whether that person unfortunately passes, or someone may have an extended period of leave. Someone may go on short-term disability, even as a founding member, where you're like, what? Now you got to pick up all those responsibilities. So you just have to be ready to wear, we talk about multiple hats. In the Army, we call it, I wear multiple hats. So if I had a hat on, it would have 15 different bills, right? I got a hat that looks really weird. But you got to be wear the funny hat sometimes.
As a follow-on to that, there are not a lot of founders are going to run into one of the founders passing. Mm-hmm. That's an uncommon event, but we'll all run into, or are all at the risk of running into, a founder or a high-impact person exiting the organization abruptly, whether that's an illness or a conflict or whatever else. So how much time and attention, if any, do you put into contingency plans, secondary responsibility, tertiary responsibility, or is it just a matter of being nimble and staying communicative? How do you guys deal with that?
Well, one of the things we've purposefully done over the last 6 to 8 months is we've been building up that leadership team where we can shift some of these responsibilities to people after we train them, and give them the opportunity to really take those challenges on. Some are not unique. Some are their first time ever handling it. I remember handling over a personnel review with someone. He says, well, I've never done this before. How do you do it? And so we would walk through that, right? You invest the time. That's the other thing. If you're going to turn over responsibilities and you've got a plan, invest the darn time in getting those people spun up for those things. Because most people who are agile and adaptable can take it on if something is thrown on them. But you got to remember, you're going to run into task saturation. They're only going to be able to handle so much. And when you're inundated with something brand new, that's going to take all your time. So maybe it's one task, it's about 100% of your time. So we've really tried to train up that next layer of leadership, so we can start to grow the business beyond 5, beyond 7, beyond 10 years. And that takes a lot of commitment. That takes a lot of overhead resources, which companies in the defense space don't like to spend, because that means it's not going against your bottom line. That's not going to direct work. But you have to be willing to spend those dollars if you're going to scale beyond your initial small group. So it's about investing in leadership and allowing the bandwidth to fail.
Speaking of bandwidth, you spoke to the need for founders at times to work very long hours, the grind and grit that you referred to. And then you also just referred to investing some time and attention into fantasy football. So how do you manage priorities and focus and determining what's worth kind of filtering to the top of your to-do list?
Yeah, so I do it by Scrum, right? So I'll put my sticky notes on a board or a wall, and I'll have my tasks on there. And I'll look at it at the beginning of every day and at the end of every day, and I'll pull 3 or 4 aside that are immediates. I've got big rocks. Those are things I have to accomplish in 3-4 months but aren't time critical. And then maybe I have a couple in the middle that require some effort, some care and feeding now and again. It's never easy to juggle, and as a company that's scaling pretty quickly, we don't have an executive staff. We don't have executive assistants or chief of staff yet. So it does become complex. You got to manage your calendar. You got to be diligent with your calendar management, that's for sure. But I like to do Scrum because it's really the only way that I can visually see all the things I have to do. I can't write 30 things on a sticky note. First of all, I can't read my own writing. And second of all, it becomes very difficult. So even when I travel, when I leave the room of my office at home, I'll take a picture of the wall. And then I'm able to edit the picture. I'll actually cross the note out on the picture and edit it so I know I've gotten through it. So whatever your system is, just stay organized. For me, it's Scrum. For others, it's whiteboards. Our operating officer is a whiteboard person, and we have those all over there. But you got to pick your organizational system, because if don't, you are destined to perish.
I like the Scrum process, and staying organized is critical for every founder. I run into trying the stress or difficulty of trying to determine whether or not something is a worthwhile detour or if it's just a distraction.
Yeah.
What's the decision-making process or the criteria that you reference to determine if something's a distraction?
Yeah, so no barnacles on the boat. That's a new expression we're using, right? Getting rid of those. So you have to be willing to say no to people. As much as they may want your time or want a meeting or want to engage, there's times where it's not within your core business. Early on, we were taking all those meetings, every one of them. Throw us at, we'll take all of them. But now, we got to focus that time and attention. And how do I determine if it's a distraction? If it doesn't fit within our core business strategy, if it's not directly related to growth from me, marketing, legislative affairs, strategy, business development, if it's not in my job jars and maybe it's in someone else's, I'll maybe give the courtesy to pass it then for a decision. But if it's aimed at me and it doesn't fit one of those core capabilities and doesn't help grow the business, I've become really good at saying, hey, sorry, we're not able to support, appreciate you reaching out. It just becomes an issue of bandwidth. If you say yes to everything, what are you really working on?
Yeah, great idea. What else? Please.
I work with ABH we started our business, and one of the things that we really believe in is that the success of the business is largely determined on the power of your network. So how would you suggest people build their network? What are the tools or how do you find those people to add to your team?
That's a great question. I'm a networkaholic. If you're in sales or you're trying to grow something and you don't have a network that's active, you're not using the tools at hand. Powerful tools include LinkedIn. There's a rule on LinkedIn: 20 connections a day, 5 to 10 engagements, writing on comments. If you do that with the LinkedIn algorithm, you can grow your network. I think I'm at over 4,000 followers in just under 2 years on LinkedIn. That's just consistent. You have to boil down and do it. Second is your business network. Go to the events, toss your card in every hand that comes out. Be willing to have a quick elevator pitch conversation. Just be ready to hand those cards out. So events within your community. And then when you're traveling or you're doing work that's outside the state for your company, for what you're doing, is I go to any networking opportunity I can, whether it's in my core industry or kind of adjacent. I'll go there just to get kind of a lay of the land. And you can better believe I've got cards with me. I've got little capability sheets. I've got a function on my phone where I can send an email in 2 clicks and push out a brief. I will just go there and I will saturate that, and I will just give that across the landscape. So growing your network is pivotal. If you're not putting the time and effort to grow your network, you're missing out on opportunities to sell your product, whether that's a service, whether that's a brand, whatever you're selling. You got to be out there and don't be afraid to have the conversation. I don't necessarily know what you do, but if you come up and talk to me and we exchange cards, I don't toss that card. I've got a little app on my phone, shout out to CamCard if you don't have it, that scans the card with AI, $20 a year, and now I've got all your data in my phone. It goes to my email, it's in a contact, and now we're buds. And so use those tools, very high fidelity tools for low cost.
Good question. We got time for one more. Sorry, we already got you. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I've already asked you if you want to pass it to somebody else.
Was there somebody else had a question? You're up.
All right, well, thank you. All right, you mentioned earlier that you haven't taken the time to smell the bread to sell. I'm just curious. You said a day will come for that. Do you know what that is? Is that a specific financial milestone? Is that a date and time? Or is that literally just the day that you decide to exit and sell your portion of the company or retire or whatever?
Yeah, that's a question that has to be considered. I would be lying if I sat here and say that we haven't had those conversations. But Infinity Labs, at least as a company that's growing, we're here to grow for the foreseeable future. If you look at the defense space, the ones who get acquired at least do engineering services or solutions. The timeline for that is 10 to 15 to 20 years. Unless you're one of these large companies maybe owned by a guy named Palmer Luckey, where you can gobble up small companies very easily for a niche capability, for a bit of intellectual property, or for a patent. That's not our business model. And so for us, it's about, specifically for me, it's about doing this as long as I love it, doing this while we have the momentum and the ability to grow the company. I happen to enjoy this a lot. I love to be on kind of the cutting edge of tech. I love to be selling. Sales is a fun game when you get used to it, but I guess when that day comes, maybe I'll consider those other alternatives. But for me, my timeline is far beyond, right? 20, 30 years if I can help it. I love what I do. If an opportunity came tomorrow, of course we would look into it, but that's certainly not anything we're looking at for the next 15 to 20 years.
He's not winded yet. He'll let you know. It's good. Any closing thoughts, Jason, as we kind of face the end of our time here?
Entrepreneurship is difficult. That's why not everybody chooses it. It is totally fine if that is not your path, but if you decide to make it your path, commit to it. Because if you go half-assed into entrepreneurship, you will get your whole ass kicked out of it. All right. It is not for the faint and weak of heart. It is not for those without the armor, because it is tough. Unless you've got some big brain idea that someone from Silicon Valley is going to purchase overnight, starting a business is hard. Learning payroll is hard. Understanding employee tax retention credits, different tax liabilities implications. It's hard stuff. But don't let that dissuade you from the challenge. Because when I crossed that entrepreneurial Rubicon 3 years ago, it was one of those Julius Caesar moments where I did not look back into Gaul. I just looked at Rome and said, I'm going to march that way, come hell or high water, and I'm going to come home with my shield or on it. And so for me, the advice is simple: commit to it. And if you can't offer that commitment, that's fine. Venture capital is a way. If you've got an idea and you want to push that out there. But as a bootstrap person, we've founded the company ourselves and built it up. There's no greater journey. I get to tell my kids now I grew a company. I get to look at my wife, who's got a family full of entrepreneurs, and tell them about our success. And I get to tell my kids on a nightly basis, I work with some of the smartest people in the world, and I believe that. And so I'm lucky to do that, but it involves an extreme amount of commitment. And for any of you that are doing that, I wish you a boatload of luck. because you will need it. There will be storms. And I appreciate you having me speak today, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Devin, for setting us up. Jason, thanks for your experience. Well done, man. Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely.